it will come up on its own. So it's a little sign to police officers that they should pull you over because you're speeding. What's good, guys? This is Rio, and today I'm in a 2019 Porsche 911 Carrera. That means that it's a 991.2 generation Carrera, not the brand new 2020 and forward 992 model that came out about 10-12 months ago. So Porsche, just like the rest of the car industry, has moved forward, progressed if you will, and thus more and more components within their cars have become electric. When we take a look back at what I consider the first modern Porsche, which is the 996 that really went away from the G-body car's style and kind of looks more similar to this car, you had a very tactile and visceral feel in that car. Moving into the 997, a car that many people consider kind of the perfect contemporary 911, you still kept a lot of that core Porsche principle, or a lot of the core Porsche principles from the 50s, the 60s, 70s, and especially 70s and 80s, where the 911 really hit its stride. Unfortunately for Porsche enthusiasts, in 2012, when the 991 generation first came out, the 991.1, a lot of people were very frustrated that Porsche had gone from a hydraulic steering system to an electric steering system. Luckily for those fans, it was just about the best electric steering system on the market. And even though other makes have kind of, let's say, matched Porsche a little bit more, at least gotten closer to Porsche's level of electric steering, Porsche themselves have continued to just keep pushing forward and making their systems even better. And I'm sure the 992's electric steering is fantastic for electric steering, but still you lose some of that tactile feel by having electric steering. Porsche really broke enthusiasts' hearts in 2016 when this 991.2 facelift came out. This is because they also happened to twin turbocharge the entire lineup. To give you some context on this, prior to 2016, the only turbocharged Porsche models, the only turbocharged 911 models were the Turbo and the Turbo S. And I believe the GT2 RS was also turbocharged. In fact, I know that it was, but that's not part of the main stable, so we'll stick with the main stable. So since 2016, the entire lineup is twin turbocharged with the exception of the GT3 and the GT3 RS. So that leaves really one main engine within the Porsche 911 lineup that's not turbocharged, with the rest being turbocharged. And what does that mean? It means that you lose exhaust noise, you lose that free revving, naturally aspirated motor that everyone had come to love. On the flip side of things, there are some benefits to this car being turbocharged. For instance, this motor, which is a 3-liter twin turbocharged flat 6-cylinder, obviously, as all 911s are, produces 370 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque. This is 20 more horsepower than the naturally aspirated version, but more significantly, it's 44 more pound-feet of torque than the naturally aspirated version. So you're definitely stepping into a bit more of a chunky and thick torque band. And what you get for that is a lot more power from about high 1000s all the way through over 5000 RPM. You get a ton of power and a ton of thrust. And this car only weighs 3,100 pounds, 3,150 pounds. What I really like about this car is stepping out of cars like the BMW M340i, which I reviewed and will link up above. You actually do feel a bit more of a tactile feel and sense in this car than you do in a car like an M340i, or even a lot of other sporty or sports cars on the market. Porsche is still able to give you some of that visceral feelings. For instance, this PDK transmission actually has clicks and notches, and you hear it and you feel it shaking and moving and changing gears. The steering, while electric, gives you a bit more feedback, definitely more feedback than certain BMW setups, and I love BMWs, but they're totally numb compared to this. And of course, the overall feel of the car. This car, for kind of how affordable it is, considering it's a sports car, really does keep up with the sense and feeling of some supercars, especially considering you can get 911s in that $200,000 range when they're Turbo S's, when they're GT3 RS's, definitely even more than that when they're GT2 RS's. So they do compete in a different trim with supercars, and this car has the same form as those cars, just a different engine or just a different suspension setup, the same chassis down beneath, so you get that feeling. So these, when they were new, because obviously this is a 2019 and now used, but when they were new, these started just over $90,000. And this particular car had a good bit of options, and I think it was right around $108,000 or $109,000. The thing with Porsche is they nickel and dime you. So this, for instance, has the premium package, which gives you things such as the Porsche Dynamic Light System Plus up front, which looks fantastic, has a very cool DRL setup on it. It also gives you comfort access, which at $90,000 isn't standard. You gotta pay for it as an option to get that keyless access that you probably would like to have in your expensive, very nice sports car. It also gives this car blind spot detection, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, which is a real shame in this car because you really should drive this car like yourself. If you bought it, drive it, suffer, you know? It commands your attention, so give it your attention. It also gives this car a Bose surround sound system, which is definitely a nice upgrade and again, worthy of having, but a shame that it's not standard in your $90,000+ starting price sports car. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that the 991.2, which this car is, of course, it has some of that visceral feeling that you're looking for still, you know, hearkening back to what Porsche's really offered you, say, 15, 20 years ago and further back. But, of course, it's going to still be missing out on some things. It's going to be better than the rest of the market, but not as good as it used to be in the past. So that's a compromise you have to make, whether or not you want some of the functionality and features you get in a newer car. You want the touchscreen, a fantastic touchscreen system. You want Apple CarPlay. You want Bluetooth audio, which again, I'm sure some of these things are found as you go back into recent models, but the further and further you go back, the more you start losing. This car, for instance, has a digital display within the cluster, and it gives you information like temperatures, boost, you can pull a map up, you can pull your music up, pull navigation up. So the more you want those things, again, the lighting system is fantastic on this car, really bright lights. So if you want those things, you kind of need to go towards the newer cars. And I think this car is definitely more visceral feeling than the 992 is, but then it's in some ways, again, then it's slower, then it's not as that has even more tech, right? The point is there's always gonna be a balance. And I think truthfully, the 997 or the 997.2 in particular is like the perfect balance of all these things. But the 991.2 does give you a ton of power in this base Carrera form. I'm telling you, like, you get the perfect compromise between being able to rev this car out up to 7,500 and not feeling like it's super fast revving and it's just gonna burn through the the turbos and make you kind of miss out. You do miss out on the exhaust note, but you get to really rev it out and feel it. And I have a hard time opening this base Carrera up on any city road. So it's definitely something that lets you mess around and have fun while finding your own limits and gives you a little bit of that tactile feeling. That's enough talking. I want to get this car out onto the road and drive it and let you guys know how I feel about it. So let's do a tall boy test. I have a bad feeling it's going to be a pretty quick tall boy test, but let's do a tall boy test and then we'll get on the road. All right, so we're pulling this beautiful 911 out onto the road right now. I do have it in sport mode and the chassis as well in sport mode. Probably won't be driving it very aggressively, obviously, but I like to have these cars kind of at their full potential. At least a sports car at its full potential, I should say. The first thing you notice, at least the first thing I noticed driving this car, is that it really is an occasion. I know a lot of people daily drive these. I would gladly daily drive one of these, but nonetheless, it definitely stands out from a lot of the other cars currently on the market, definitely from brands like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, a lot of this car's German counterparts, if you will. You can, of course, get extremely or extraordinarily fast vehicles from all those makes, AMGs, M's, RS's, etc. But it's the overall chassis and feel of this car. It's the fact that this base Carrera is kind of the foundation for cars like a GT2 RS that are $400,000 or in that range, if you will, and are making 700 something horsepower. So that really helps this car stand out, while a car like an E63 AMG is an awesome car, but its foundation is an E300 or E350. So that's kind of the big difference you feel chassis-wise. Something I also immediately notice every time I get behind the wheel of a 911 is how, and I like this, is how delightfully easy it is to point this car in any direction you want. In a lot of senses, it feels like it's on rails in the best ways possible. the weight distribution. So the engine's obviously so far back. It's not even, really, it's behind the rear axle basically. So you get a 42-58 weight distribution, and that gives you a really nimble, playful front. So I never really feel like, it's the complete opposite of the kind of pig-like characteristics of Audis, but it's an extreme the other direction. Some people don't like it. I think most people do like it, and that's why Porsche 911s are so loved. So this wouldn't be a proper video without discussing the exterior looks. Now, almost anybody out there knows what a 911 looks like. I think it's almost synonymous with the word sports car to most people. So people know what it looks like, but with this 991.2, there are some things that are different than the original 991, and definitely some things that are quite different from the 992. So in particular, they sharpen the front up a little bit on these facelifted cars. The front, aside from the much thinner turn signals, doesn't look a ton different. Of course, the lights are different, some of the grills are different, but the front between the .1 and the .2 is pretty similar, particularly on the more base cars. But out rear, you get these new three-dimensional taillights that really do stand out. A lot of people notice that they have this like three-dimensional look, and people will kind of be able to more easily distinguish the difference between a .1 and a .2 out rear. They also added these new they added these new vertical grills across the rear spoiler, which brings me to the rear spoiler, something that I'm also very excited that this car has. I'm excited about it because I'm a guy who likes cars, so a spoiler is cool no matter what. I love the big wings on the GT3s, the GT3 RSs. I love all that stuff. And I think this spoiler is pretty cool. The fact that it goes up and down, it gives you the duality of being able to kind of hide it, especially in slower driving. I think I do have it up right now, of course, but you can bring it down at low speeds, not be in any way ostentatious if you think it's ostentatious to have your wing up. I don't. But at the same time then, at higher speed, I think it's 75 miles an hour or so, it'll naturally come up. I haven't even hit that speed in this car, so I have no idea if that's the exact speed, but somewhere around there, it will come up on its own. So it's a little sign to police officers that they should pull you over because you're speeding. But really what you notice about the looks of this car is the exhaust. That's the big difference between prior generations and this. So previously you had more curvy exhausts on the 911s in general. You get either a boxy exhaust on the base Carrera, which is what this car has, the complete base exhaust with a very boxy exhaust finisher. Then there's an optional sports exhaust available throughout the line between this, the S. It comes standard on the Carrera T, and on the GTS it's also standard, I believe. But that exhaust is in the center. It's not exactly perfectly in the center the way it is on a GT3, for instance, but it's generally speaking a center exit exhaust. And then on the S car, there's also a regular base S exhaust to really complicate things, and that's twin pipes on either side, which is again common with the S variant, but even in that car, if you get the sports exhaust, you get the same center exhaust you would get in this car. Now, the one model I mentioned that I kind of want to go back to for a second before I forget is the Carrera T. I think the Carrera T is kind of the perfect 911. Look, I'm not gonna lie, if I could, I would get a GT3 RS or even a GT2 RS, but there's undoubtedly a beauty to the simplicity of a 911. And you definitely feel that in this car, being that it's a base car, but you especially feel it in the Carrera T because it brings it pulls from some of the GT3 and the Turbo's best features and gives them to you in a really affordable price range. And with a low power output, but that lets you kind of maximize your fun and really push the car to its limits, where in this car, where in a Turbo, for instance, you may kind of find yourself having to hold yourself back or resist. So this particular car has the optional 20-inch wheels that I think look fantastic. They are 245s in the front and 305s in the rear, which give you both a ton of grip, but also a delightful look from the rear. Really nice and chunky tires. And again, they keep proving to you, or to me at least, why even just a base 911 is a perfectly balanced sports car. But driving this car, what really stands out to me is that in no way does it feel insufficient. Sure, one thing I can complain about a little bit is that I wish it had a bit more of an exhaust note or a bit more tone to its exhaust. But if you really rev it out, it does have a bit of tone. It's just unfortunate that in that lower, more daily driving range, you don't get too much noise and too much emotion out of the exhaust. Aside from that, the steering, like I've said now several times, is amazing. This car having the premium pack gives you some of those luxury components that maybe make it more livable as a daily or as a more commonly used vehicle. What you also get that I really love is the look. And I'd be lying to you if I said that the look of the 911 isn't a major component. Obviously, it drives incredibly well, but the look really evokes the majority of the emotion of this car, to me at least. And it just looks like a little frog in all the right ways. It has the little bulges for the lights, which you definitely notice while you're driving, which makes you feel like you're in something special. It's kind of hard to see the wing or the spoiler up, but when you see the car parked with the spoiler up, it looks very cool, it looks very sporty. And I think the main point of this car is that while it's daily drivable for sure, it gives you a sense of occasion that a lot of other cars in the same price range and from similar makes and with similar performance just aren't able to give you. And of course, you can play the option game. Like I said, Porsche loves to nickel and dime. You could tack on anything you'd like. You can get a higher trim or a higher model, if you will. You can get an S, you can get a GTS, you can get a Turbo, a GT3. I think for the sake of simplicity and with a more modest budget, these now being in that $80,000-ish range used, even equipped like this, you kind of can't go wrong. And the only thing I would tell somebody is if they're really looking for the most visceral experience and they're okay with giving up some of the luxury, maybe you could look at a 997.2 GT3, and that might be not too much more. It will cost more than this, of course, but that might be the kind of car for somebody who says, you know what, I don't care about having a screen or Bluetooth or CarPlay, whatever. Maybe not Bluetooth, but CarPlay, but I do want a 6-speed. In this car, by the way, it's a 7-speed manual if you get that as an option. But you say, no, I want manual, naturally aspirated motor, yada, yada, yada. Okay, well then look that direction. But if you want what this car has to offer, which is a ton of power for the weight, for the price, for the fact that it's a base 911, luxury, reliability, and the look and feel of a Porsche, you can't go wrong with this car. And for that, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. This is a Carrera vibe. Through and through. Not much more else I can say, but I truly do enjoy spending time in a car like this, and I hope I can spend more time in a car like this. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, tune back in for more. And as always, this is Rio. Peace.